Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." But the fear and emotions that attack our conscience when we think about death leave us at a standstill and grip the very source of our existence. It is something that requires time to put beyond one's life when it occurs to someone who we love and care for. Do we, as a world, think about death enough? Should we even fill our minds with such a dark and intimidating question? There are many of us who would prefer to simply toss it on the pile of things beyond my control. But then why is it that as a whole we naturally agonize about even the possibility of death? Welcome to Sit Down and Listen. The ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus believed that the essence of life was a peaceful contentment devoid of pain or fear. This Epicurus believed that the one thing that was holding people back from fulfillment and enjoyment in life was accomplishing this feat of the fear of death. The inhabitants of ancient Greece lived in constant fear of the gods and the wrath that could fall upon them. They viewed their mortal life as a temporary condition. Their sins and wrongdoings would be judged harshly by temperamental, vengeful gods. The expectation of pain and torment for eternity at the hands of Thanatos, the terrifying manifestation of death itself. Epicurus believed that the main obstacle to a fulfilled life was the irrational fear of the incurring of wrath. From who? From the gods, and suffering for eternity in the lair of Hades. We are so preoccupied with fearing death that we refuse to acknowledge life. And this is the point that Epicurus was trying to push on the people. Epicurus sought to challenge this and help others understand. And how did he do it? He did it by trying to explain the nature of death. But in the world that we live in today, our gods are more common and less wrathful than the gods of ancient Greece. Image, self-image, sexuality, how many material benefits we can accumulate, these are just some of the gods that we have exalted as a culture. As if he had a crystal ball, Marcus Aurelius, speaking about something that he could not understand the reality behind the irony of, said, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than about our own." We have elevated the God of perceptions to such a degree that we don't allow ourselves to live. And this is the parallel within the thought of Epicurus. How have we decided to live today? What isn't letting us move towards what we should all pursue? And are we willing to remove those barriers from our lives? To Epicurus, the world was constructed purely of atoms and empty space. The consciousness, meaning the soul for him, interacted very closely and in a very dynamic way with the body itself. See, the idea was that the soul was made of atoms supposedly scattered throughout the body. However, those atoms would be fragile, and Epicurus taught that at the time of our death, the soul would evaporate entirely. It would evaporate into nothingness. Death marks the end of consciousness and sensation for this philosopher. This would mean that we would be unable to feel any emotional or physical pain. If we are no longer capable of feeling fear or pain when we decease, then it is foolish to be preoccupied with the notion of death. Epicurus believed that this fear was an obstacle to true happiness in this lifetime. If we could accept death, not ignore it or mystify it, but truly accept it as the end of being, then we could find happiness in this life. Plato, in his dialogue Gorgias, ends with a monologue of Socrates about life after death. Sticking to the traditional beliefs of the ancient Greeks, he speaks about a realm in which the guardians of the afterworld would judge dead souls individually for their fitness or unfitness to enter the heavenly realms. Carefully, Plato distinguishes between the beauty of the body and the beauty of moral character of the soul. Kant, also a very prominent philosophical mind that we've looked at briefly, he maintained in his first critique that the human mind is too frail to fully understand the deep truths of anything beyond the five senses, including God or the afterlife. Metaphysics, or meaning what is beyond human powers, is too beyond to begin with. However, when we look at Kant's third critique, he made one metaphysical leap. Because morality, he said, is divine and eternal. It is impossible that the wicked could benefit from this life and that the good people could suffer in this life, so that death would be the end of the story. So Kant concluded that there must be an afterlife simply to balance the scales of justice. And remember, Kant was an adamant attacker of the Judeo-Christian faith. For Kant, this becomes the motivation to live the best life one possibly can, to suffer the least amount of judgment in the next world. Friedrich Nietzsche maintained that once we live, and that is enough. The fact that we live once is enough. For the strong who live as they please, who fulfill themselves by their free will, and who refuse to be influenced by what he called slave morality, in conforming to what the millions are following. But Nietzsche also taught this. He taught the idea of an eternal recurrence of life. In his view, if and only if time is truly infinite, and this is going to blow us away, then we have already lived this same life exactly as it is without any changes whatsoever, an infinite amount of times. And we will also live this same life exactly as it is, the same people, in the same century, same everything, an infinite number of times. But the thoughts of Marcus Aurelius, another philosopher, a Stoic philosopher, can also shed some light on the debate about death. This is a man who stated that in the end, our loss is exactly the same as everyone else's. We just lose the present moment because that's all that we have. This is very close to the way many people address death now, and there's no way around it. Marcus is right. The future has not yet been formed from a human perspective. The past has already gone and is unchangeable. You and I exist now, regardless of your age and circumstances of death. All you really lose, all we really lose, is the present moment. And that's the great equalizer for everyone else. So this is what we can say from the many perspectives that can be summed up into these two ways of attack. After death, your existence will carry on into another place, or it simply won't. You'll be beyond sensation in something like a deep, deep sleep. And in the words of Plato, this means that there is truly no fear of death. Because he says, if death is like this, I say it, it is an advantage. For all eternity would then seem to be no more than a single night. If on the other hand, death is a change from here to another place, and what we are told is true, and all who have died are there, then what greater blessing could there be? But in all of his greatness, Plato never got a chance to listen to the man with unparalleled wisdom. He was a man that came from a simple and unspecial town called Nazareth. But this man had something that no other man had and no other man will ever have. I think this man has some things to say about the complexity of human fear about death. This man said to a couple of women that he loved, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live, and everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And now, that all the eyebrows have gone up of those who are listening to me, and we start to question, and the question that we are confronted, that this man poses, is, do you believe this? That is the greatest philosopher making that question, making a declaration about himself, pitting the gift of life and resurrection to himself. What authority does this man have to make such a statement? And is it reliable? These are the questions that are probably streaming through your mind. And if the religious bells are ringing in your head, I challenge us to meditate on these things. And for the sake of the constant pounding on your door by the fist of death, to examine what's in front of you. But what about the existence beyond the one that we have now? Is this the final page yet to be turned? Well, I can only share the words of the psalmist. And these words say it all for me. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me.